Welcome to my live. I am making progress here, y'all. We have been going live twice a week. I'm really excited about all the content that I have planned for y'all. Hold on, I'm just adjusting. So give me a few seconds rather to just get this how I want it, centered. Got my support. I feel like that's a good look. I move things around in my podcast room, if you can tell. And yes, we're going to start chatting today about birthing myths. That is kind of a tongue twister. Anyways, we're going to talk about the myths of birthing, natural birth, all kinds of birth, and what you've been lied to as a woman or as a man, because even if you're not a woman and this runs across your feed, you probably will be engaging with a woman at some point. You're probably perhaps going to have a child at some point. So it's good to have a perspective of someone who has a really natural approach to birthing, who's had a natural birth, who understands about the birthing process from the holistic standpoint, the tantric standpoint, and the regular standpoint. So, birthing myths debunked. That's what we're chatting about today. I'm going to give you some pretty interesting stats. And if you haven't done this before, please like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications, because once we get through Mother's Day week, I've spent the last few weeks really talking about Mother's Day. We'll have two more, I believe, what they said, two more chats about moms, and then we're going to switch into men. Semen retention, tantric edging, no fapping, all these types of things that you guys are curious about or have studied, but maybe don't really know exactly where to turn and which information is correct. I'm going to debunk all of that for you. And give you some cool science behind it, all that stuff. But we're going to get through Mother's Day first, because I think it's really important that we honor mothers, talk about mothers. I'm a mom, you have a mom, and I think we are not giving our moms enough credit today. So I really want to kind of, I picked a few topics that I thought were interesting, and I want to dive into this. If you stay to the end, there will be a very, very special treat for you, but you have to stay. And if you don't, well, then catch the replay. Make sure you comment, let me know where you're listening from, how you're liking these lives. Once I get going with these lives a little more, I'm going to start having special guests just for you, athletes, doctors, a lot of cool people in their respective fields. And we're going to chat about intimacy, because you know that's what we do. All right, let's get started. Okay. All right, so I'm going to read a little statistic for you here that I thought was quite interesting. Let me make sure that I get, yes. Okay, did you know that 67% of women who gave birth vaginally had an epidural in labor, and 31% were given Pitocin to speed up their labors? So if you're doing the math with me, y'all, that's 70-some% of women who are foregoing natural births, just not even, I'm not sure if they considered it, but they're not having them nonetheless. And then 31 of that 70 or 67, which we'll call it 70%, so 31 of that 70% will say are getting Pitocin to speed up the labor. Okay, 20% of women who had their membranes I can't speak today, y'all. Membranes artificially ruptured. Ooh, 17% of women had an episiotomy. I cannot say that word today, guys. Episiotomy. Why can I not say that? And 31 had cesarean. So these are all the different things in the categories of birth. So cesarean, whether their membranes were ruptured, where they had epidural, etc. But we're going to stick to the main points. The main points would be, how do women give birth today? Well, there's two main ways. One is vaginally. Now, they can give birth vaginally, but it not be naturally. Okay, I know that doesn't make sense, but I'll explain it momentarily. And the other way would be um, cesarean, right? So you can give birth vaginally or you can give birth by cesarean. Now, within those categories, there's different things. So if you give birth vaginally, you could do it naturally, meaning there was no kind of induction, there was no inducing drugs. You just labored, had the baby naturally. Everything was natural as can be, which is how I experienced it. Or you could still give birth vaginally, but you were induced, meaning they gave you drugs, Pitocin, which pushes, basically it's a inducing drug that forces the contractions to kind of like speed up, and then it like pushes your labor forward. So you might think of it as like a pre-workout, right? You're like getting a boost for your workout. It's kind of the same thing. It's like boosting your labor. And so those are the main ways. I'm just going to move this up just a smidge because my back is going to hurt if I keep doing that. There, that's better. Okay. So those are the two main ways. Now, I was shocked to learn that there was about 70% of women who gave birth vaginally. So that's really good news. Why is that good news? The reason why that's good news is because during vaginal birth, this is like the most crucial component of giving birth naturally. When you give birth naturally, the baby travels down the birthing canal. I don't know why I can't speak today. I just got done working out, so maybe my brain's a little bit out of it. Travels down the birth canal through the vaginal walls and comes out, right? During that process, it's very important because the baby, their head and their entire body gets flooded with microbiome, with healthy microbiome, which is got probiotics that are immune boosting properties. So if you have a baby cesarean, that baby misses out on that like boost of immune support for their entire life. Now, this is obviously very sad because it's almost like, you know, parents, you want to give your child a head start in life. So one of the main things you could do would be to try to have the child naturally through the birth canal, if at all possible, right? If something happens, there needs to be an intervention, obviously you do what you have to do to save your life, to save the baby's life. But if you can do it, why would you want to schedule a cesarean that bypasses that whole process of the woman actually being able to pass on that probiotic, those live like the microbiome that the baby gets from this? It's like flooded with bacteria that is in the vaginal birth canal as the baby comes out. So when a baby gets that, the babies tend to thrive more. Now that's the one thing I didn't check on the statistics on that, but I'll save that for another one. It's just like you're giving this child a slight edge in their health, in their immunity, in everything. So that was good that almost 70% of women are having their baby that way. We know about 31 or 32% of all births are induced. So that means that the baby is, the mother is given Pitocin, which is basically a hormone that causes the contractions in the uterus to start. Now, I think what's interesting to understand about Pitocin is that there's a lot of people that don't like it because it can lower the baby's oxygen supply or change the baby's heart rate. And those are things obviously that you don't want to happen, or maybe you wouldn't prefer to happen, right? But how it affects the mother. And I think this is the interesting thing that a lot of people don't know. So for a woman, her body has a certain level of pain, a threshold of pain. Let's just say my threshold was like a 10, right? And that's my body, is the way I'm built, my weight, the size of my hips, everything. It's like, okay, Shakti can handle this 10 level of pain during childbirth, right? And let me tell you, it was a 10 most of the time. But what I will say is what happens when they give you Pitocin rather, that fluctuates and sort of offsets the natural threshold of pain that a woman is naturally set to have, and messes us up. It's like when men take steroids, right? It totally messes up their hormones. What happens? You see back knee, you see acne, you see ED problems, smaller testicles. It messes up their hormones. It's the same thing with women. So when they're given Pitocin, it fluctuates their threshold of pain, and it tends to make the contractions last longer and longer than the woman's natural threshold of pain will allow. So it makes the birthing process more intense. Now, if she is just being induced and maybe not getting an epidural, which we'll talk about next, well, then she is left with what some would consider an extremely challenging birthing process, because now, say my level of pain was 10, well, the Pitocin has set me to a 20. The contractions are lasting so much longer because now my hormones are offset, and my body's natural ability to be able to hold on to the pain, breathe, relax, let it go, wait, that time isn't regulated because it's been induced. It's artificial, so it's not natural. So it throws the body off. And I remember during my labor thinking, okay, like I need this to pass. And then it would pass, and I would get time to breathe, to relax, to kind of get back into my zone, to find my like Zen again, and then prepare for the next one. Well, what I've been told, when women are induced, it takes that away. I don't have that experience personally of knowing what that's like, but from the stories and the things, the natural childbirth and all the things that I've studied, for women, this totally messes up their pain threshold, right? Now we get to the next interesting fact. Let me get back to my stats here because I didn't memorize this. All right, so we know that 32% of all births are induced, which might lead to it might cause too many contractions, or contractions that are out of the ordinary. I talked about lowering the baby's heart and all that. So a woman birthing process is challenging at best. But when we're inducing, unless it's a medical reason to induce the baby, then it's not necessary. Your body has been designed with the appropriate threshold, the appropriate amount of hormones to be able to ebb and flow with the contraction process. I did hypnobirthing, so we didn't even call it contractions. We called it pressure waves, which was way more intense than it really was, but you got to go along with the hypnosis process. So this can be a huge inconvenience isn't even the word, setback in a woman's natural childbirthing process, because now her threshold of pain is all whacked. She's having to go for longer. She can't get her breath to get to the next, and it can just make labor more challenging and more uncomfortable. All right, so where did we? Okay. Wow. That's crazy. Okay, so 67, sorry, I just really let that sit in. So almost 70% of women had an epidural in labor. Wow. So that means that 70-some percent, basically almost 70% of women are not having natural childbirth. They're having vaginal childbirth, but they are getting numbed from the waist down, which can cause a plethora of things, negative things that can happen if they miss when they're doing the epidural. It's a lot longer recovery when you've been induced and drugged up versus natural. And so I think it's important for women to understand that they have options, okay? So we know like 70% of women are not fully coherent during labor. They're numb from here. A lot of they've been induced and they're not really there. Now, I have to say, I'm not going to get into all the negative implications of the epidural because I don't really want to get into that today. Today was more about the myths of natural childbirth versus regular, and what are the pros and what are the cons. All right, so for myself personally, I think the biggest misconception is that it's riskier to have, so I'll start with my number one. It's riskier to have a natural, or it's riskier to have a natural childbirth. So that's what the media, that's what the medical system wants you to think. It's like riskier for you to have a natural childbirth than to have a birth where you are being induced, where you're in a hospital, where you're on an epidural, all these things like that. But that is actually not the case at all. Now, the only reason it can become risky is if the mom like refuses medical intervention should something go awry during childbirth, which sometimes it just happens, right? And you have to take medical precautions. Now, I'll tell you for myself personally, my birthing story. I won't tell you all of it. I'll just tell you a little bit of it. I decided I was going to have a natural childbirth. Like I just knew that. I knew I was going to have it. I knew I was going to use a lot of the tantric practices that I'd just been training. Those were going to come into play, and how I prepared for labor, how I even, the words I used about labor, like how I labeled it, how I envisioned it. All those things I already knew. I had a plan set out. So a lot of women don't realize, but you have to have like a birthing plan, because when that moment happens and the pain kind of takes you over, you can't really fully, you're not super cognitive sometimes to make like rational decisions. Or if a nurse offers you pain, you might say yes. But for me, I had it written out. No inducing, no epidural, no drugs, no nothing, no eye drops, no shots, nothing, even for my son in the hospital, right? So I had that set in motion before I even went to labor, like months before, right? And so I think that a lot of people always kind of assume like if there is like natural births are just riskier because they think it's riskier because there's not like a medical intervention, or there's not like medical practices surrounding the birth. But I'll tell you what happened with myself personally. So I wanted to have my son at home. I was like, I wanted to do a water birth. I'm an earth sign, a lot of fire, very little water. I like the water, it's soothing. I wanted to be on a ball and in the tub. My girlfriend, who was a doula, but had not doulaed in like 10, 15 years, was like, I don't feel comfortable with that. You can labor to what point, but then I want to take you to the hospital because I just want to be sure that if something happens, there is medical intervention there, because she didn't feel like fully confident in her abilities because she hadn't been doing doula work for like 10 plus years. So I said, okay, I respect that. But I will tell you a huge secret. The worst part of labor was the drive to the hospital. It was so intense because you're in, and I was in like a nice SUV, but I couldn't like get comfortable. I wanted to move. Every bump you like felt, it was awful. If I didn't have the drive to the hospital, my whole birthing story would have been like so much more peaceful. That was just a lot. And then walking into the hospital, like I liked it being in the tub. I was in the tub before we left to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, unfortunately, I didn't have a birthing tub, but I did have, was there a ball there? I feel like there was a ball there. And I think there was, I used that for a while, but by the time I got to the hospital, I was like ready to go. I didn't even get checked into the hospital when my son came because I had done most of the hard work at home. Like I had walked a couple miles, I was on the ball, I was in the tub, and I was just like ready. So that is one of the biggest myths, I believe, is that the natural birth is riskier than a medical birth. And it's really absolutely not, unless that mom is unwilling to accept medical intervention if necessary. Now, obviously, it's important to know how close you are to a hospital, how close you are to things like that if you are doing it at home. Most of the birthing centers, even if it's not at a hospital, are close to one, or they have the best, tools and things that they need if they have to do some kind of reviving or resuscitation or things like that. So don't be an idiot, but also don't be afraid of natural childbirth. I mean, we've been doing this for how many thousands of years? Women have been giving birth in fields and then going on. It's only going back to work. It's only recently that we've treated pregnancy and birth like a death sentence or like an excuse to gain a bunch of weight and be lazy, versus like a way of welcoming life into the world. And that, yes, it's going to be full of some challenges, but that is something totally doable that you can do, and you can do it in a safe way naturally. So I think that's one of the biggest myths about childbirth. It's completely safe and it's completely natural. It's actually, okay, so another misconception is you can't have a natural childbirth in a hospital. People think that if you go to a hospital, it's basically like whatever they tell you to do. These people work for you. Like, you, the doctors and the nurses, like, they can't tell you what to do. It is your body. And I think it's important that people remember that. Like, have a birthing plan, have someone there that's coherent and that can enforce it when you're in your weakest moments. And they can't tell you what to do with your body. But I will tell you this, y'all. They're not making, listen, you have to think, everything is about a financial gain in the end. And they're not making money off of women taking, 12 to 20 hours to labor, right? How are they making money? They're making money by women going in, getting the baby, getting out, and the next person coming in, right? It's like the fast food line. Go up, you order food, you pay for it, you go. They don't want someone to stand there and order for, ages. What do I want? I don't know. I'm changing my mind. No, they want you to get your order, go so they can serve the next person. It's fast food for a reason, right? So it's the same thing when you think about like birthing in the hospital. They don't want women to birth and take a long time, because sometimes natural birth can take longer, because you're not inducing, you're taking the natural process, you're not adding extra hormones and things into the mix. So in that respect, it's not a moneymaker. So Pitocin helps to 10x that process, because it speeds up the contractions, which ultimately speeds up the labor and gets the woman with the baby and on to the next. The other thing you have to remember is that, almost 70% of those women are having epidurals, we know, which is crazy. I didn't fully read that to my understanding. I could not believe that like 67% of women are getting epidurals. That is just mind-blowing to me. I didn't realize that having a natural vaginal childbirth without drugs was so rare, like 30%. So all those women who are getting epidurals, a lot of times, unfortunately, those are leading to cesareans, which I said is 32%. Now, what do we know about cesareans? Do they take a long time? No. What are they doing? They're numbing, they're making an incision, they're pulling the baby out, they're putting the baby on the mom, they're stitching up the woman, and then they're off. That is fast, if you will, faster, right, than possibly a woman laboring for a day or more. And many women schedule their cesareans like they would schedule a blowouts or their nails, right? And it's great for the doctors, because doctors are making a lot of money doing cesareans, right? C-sections, if you will. So I think it's important to understand that. You can have a natural birth in a hospital. You just have to have a birthing plan. You have to have someone to induce it. The good things about having, and I'll tell you with my story, I'm glad actually I had, even though I did not want to birth my son in a hospital, in the end, I'm glad we did it there. When my son was born, his cord was wrapped a little bit, and the doctor unwrapped it very quickly. And his color wasn't fully there. They gave him to me. He was crying. It wasn't like he cried right away. Everything, all that stuff happened. He was crying. Everything was fine, if you will, but they didn't like his color. He was a little pale. And I remember thinking, I just for some reason thought my son was just going to come out black. I don't know why. It's kind of funny. And his coloring was off. So they put him under the heat lamps and they just rubbed him. And then his coloring came back and they put him right on me so we could do skin to skin. It is so important, right? So I'm happy that he was born in the hospital and that did have a natural birth in the hospital. So the benefits of having the baby in the hospital would be on-site monitoring, intervention, fast access to operating room if there's emergency, lower risk of child mortality if there is something to go wrong and you're not in a, hospital or in a birthing suite, things like that. Access to labor pain relief if you request it, which I already told you that whole song and dance, right? Okay, so another myth is I talked about the risky alternative that you can't have childbirth. All right, so let's talk about something. I want to throw this in really quickly because I feel like sometimes people might think I'm being judgmental because I'm talking, about certain things that I did for my son that I'm so proud of. Like, I had a natural vaginal drug-free birth. I breastfed my son around the clock until he was 3.5 and on and off until he was 7. Things like this. Like, I never gave my son baby food. He only never drank formula. He never had, like, these things, right? I don't say them to brag. I say them because I want women to know what's possible. That if you want to give your child a leg up, that those options are available to you. You don't, and my son never had a bottle or a pacifier. Like, you don't have to do those things just because they sell you those things to do. You can have a child natural. You can feed him, nurse him most of the time, and then you can feed him real natural whole foods when the time's right that have been softly, roasted or things of that nature. You don't need to put plastic or silicone in his mouth. You don't need to do any of those things. You don't have to do those things. And I think that is more my reasoning in having these conversations. So another myth is that natural childbirth makes you a better mom. That's not true. Sorry guys, I have a piece of hair, it's driving me nuts. That is not true at all. It simply means that you chose the road less traveled and that there are many advantages to that. There's many advantages to having your child naturally, vaginally, without drugs. One is the recovery time is so quick. Like, yes, and I think the next one I'm going to do is what they don't tell you about after childbirth. Is I was quick up on my feet. I literally came home and made everyone breakfast that day. Like, I had my son at night. I checked in. Well, we didn't check in. We arrived to the hospital about 7:30, and my son was fully born at 9:50. Now, we had to stay one full more night because they have to do testing of their ears and stuff, and the doctors and things were gone by 10 p.m. Like, they were gone. So I stayed that first night because I had him at 10, let's just say, and then the next night. And then after all the testing was done, of course, they released me. So that morning I went home and I cooked for the entire family, which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us. And like, no problem, right? Made pancakes, made eggs, and things like that. So I think the recovery time is so much quicker. I was back to doing yoga, hot yoga, 4 weeks, literally 4 weeks on the dot. And back to having sex 4 weeks later. Like, I got my period again. It was insane. Like, my body was just ready to make another baby like that, which was really a raw deal for me because I thought I was going to be able to enjoy a year of no menstrual cycle. That's what all my friends and all these pregnant ladies who'd had kids told me, and that did not happen for me. So, okay. So we know 32% of pregnant women have vaginal birth and cesarean. Who can't have vaginal birth have cesarean. About 67% of those women are having induced labor and an epidural. Okay, so now we're down to the last couple myths. All right. It's riskier to have a natural childbirth. You can't have babies naturally in the hospital. That you have to be induced, that you do not have to do that. You don't have to do what the hospital sells you. You don't have to take what's on the menu there, right? When you go to eat, you just order what you want. So when you have your child, even if you want to have a child in a hospital, but you want to do it naturally, take what you want on the menu, all right? So when a child is born, I don't know if you realize it, I'm going to look this up just to make sure I'm quoting you the right number of shots that a newborn gets. And bear with me, guys, and listeners on Spotify and Apple. Let me just tell you 1 second. Okay, so basically when your having your child and he's a newborn, there is about one, two, I can't get a number, but I know for a fact that they try to give your baby a hepatitis B dose within 12 hours of birth. Now, if you know about hepatitis B, there's only a few ways you contract it, right? Intravenous, like needle use, drug use, tattoos, or anal sex, essentially, are the main ways. But they're trying to give newborns 12 hours after birth a hepatitis B shot. And nobody ever questions it, right? They just, oh, their doctor said to do it, do it. Okay. So that's one of the shots that I'm trying to get the actual number that they try to give the baby during birth. So back to my initial quote is that you don't have to accept everything on. Okay, thank you for Ken, a pre-med student. I'm going to answer that question in just a moment. You don't have to take everything that's on the menu at the hospital just because they tell you. So during pregnancy, they try to vaccinate the mom with certain vaccines that protect you and protect the baby and things of that nature. And I just refused all of them. I was like, I just don't feel like I need to be vaccinated. I'm extremely healthy. I just spent a year in Thailand, like doing all these purification practices. My energy body's clean, my physical body's clean. Like I'm clean. I don't want to get these shots, right? And it's not necessarily the vaccinations that I have the issue with. It's the fillers and the byproducts that they put in the vaccinations. And if you're curious about that list, then you should take a peek. And I don't want this video to get demonetized. I didn't even mean to go this deep into it, or not demonetized. I don't want to get this flagged for talking about this sort of things. My whole point is vaccinations are great. They're useful, and many people, need them, and they're great for herd immunity and things like that. But my whole point is that you have a prerogative. You have a say in your body. You have a say in your newborn baby's body. So my say was, I do not want any vaccinations while I'm pregnant. I do not want any vaccinations upon birth. I do not want you to put drops in my son's eyes. I do not want you to do anything but clear his nasal passages and just let him chill, man. And let him be, for as long as possible. Let the umbilical cord sit because it's still getting nutrients. So that was my thing. And so I want you to know that that is just an option for you, and that you need, it's so funny. I can't get a straight like answer on how many they're giving to you in the first few days of life. But I promise you there are a lot, and it's disturbing because it's a newborn baby, right? So choose your vaccines, be informed, know which ones are absolutely necessary, know which ones are probably not necessary, Hep B, like really? And then make your decision, be informed. You do not have to take everything on the menu. And so my son was super healthy. I did encapsulate my placenta upon birth, and I took it. Hindsight, I wish that I would have just kind of taken it home and blended it and put it into a smoothie and drank it right away, because there's a lot of stuff out there now saying encapsulating doesn't work, this and that. Who knows? And it's obviously not as potent as like taking it. It's just like if you take like the real ginger and eat it versus if you like powder it up and put it into a capsule, it's kind of like the same concept. So, okay, so back to my last final point, and then I'm going to answer this question. You don't need to take everything on the menu. It's not important to do it just because you want to acquiesce to whatever the doctor and the nurse is telling you. So one, you can choose to have a natural vaginal drug-free birth if you want. Number two, it is not riskier to have a natural birth. The risks and complications are, I don't want to go into this too much, but I would say it's riskier. And from the studies that I've seen, and from the peers and things that I've watched, obviously cesarean is way more risky. Inducing and having Pitocin can completely throw off the natural biorhythm of birth and the contractions and the pain tolerance and etc. So it's not true that natural birth is riskier. It is riskier if you don't have medical intervention nearby that you're willing to accept should something go awry. I mean, I think that's just common sense, right? And third, you can also have a natural birth in a hospital should your insurance only cover hospital births, because that was the case for me. They did not cover doula. At that time, I was just coming back from my Tantra training in Thailand. I hadn't worked in over a year. I had been just studying, practicing under my gurus. So several hundred or several thousands of dollars to a birthing center and like an official midwife was just not an option for me at that time. So I did have to have a natural birth in a hospital. So it is possible. Obviously, you need to have a birthing plan in order and have someone to enforce that who is coherent and not going in and out of labor pains, whether that's a husband, a spouse, a midwife, a doula, a mother, a friend, a boyfriend. I don't care, just have someone. Remember, you don't have to take everything on a menu. A myth is that your child has to be given all the protocol that the hospital says. No. You can refuse treatment, including Hep vaccines, including vitamin K drops, all these things that they're putting in the eyes. You do not have to take what's offered on the menu. You have a choice. And I think you should have a choice. It's your body. It's your child's body. That leads me to the last point that I forgot, circumcision. Now, I know this one is an interesting one, right? You do not have to circumcise your baby. You don't have to do it. Now, I have to let this sink in for a moment, because I know that many people are attached to circumcision because of their biblical views. In the Bible, it was considered, unclean for men, young boys, to not have a circumcision. And how they do it in Judaism, I believe they don't have a circumcision on birth. I believe it's a little bit later, if I'm not mistaken. Please, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's like a ritualistic thing that they do, and I don't think it's at birth. But someone correct me if I'm wrong. I do not want to misinterpret anyone's religious beliefs and practices. That is not my intention at all. But I know from a biblical, the Christian perspective, that it was considered like unclean for you not to be circumcised. However, if you know the Bible, and if you read the Bible, which I have and I do, you have to take the Bible not literally in some respects. Because if that was the case, we would do 99% of what we do now would be a sin, including everything from the food we eat to having earrings to having wine to so many things. Like, you can't even say all the things that would be a sin. I believe that you have to work out your own salvation, as the Bible says. And for me, I could not, with a good, clean conscience, say yes to someone cutting my son's lingam off hours after he was, or minutes after he was born. I just could not do that. Now, maybe you have a stronger sense of, this is something that needs to be done. I don't care if it hurts. I don't care about the emotional scarring or the implications of the scarring that it could lead to later on in life as a lingam and as a man and his relationship to his lingam and his sexuality. Like, maybe that's you. But for me, it was a hell no. I was not going to do that. And I told my son to this day, if when you're of age, you're 18, and you decide that you would like to go in and cut the top of your lingam off for it to be more aesthetic, by all means, go ahead. I'm not going to do that. And parents that do, I don't judge them, but it was not for me. I just did not believe that it was necessary. And my son has no issues. He's been shown how to clean. He knows how to clean it. It's not a big deal. And for a lot of things, for a lot of men who have not been circumcised, it's a positive thing in many respects. And I just don't want to get it into this in this episode, because we're talking about motherhood and the myths around birthing. So we'll save that for another time. So we'll go back over the myths again. The first myth is that, let me get my list here again, that it's riskier to have a natural childbirth. Number 2, you can't have babies natural in a hospital. Number 3, that you have to really, did I say that you can't? Yeah, that you have to take everything that's on the menu in regards to like what they offer you in regards to shots and labor and things like that. And number 3, or number 4 rather, that you have to have a circumcision to have a healthy, happy son. The other one, number 5, and I'm not putting them in the right order, is that you're a bad mom if you don't have your child naturally. That's just simply not the case. I've told you the reasoning on why it's important to consider having a natural vaginal birth, because of the gut flora and not the gut flora, the vaginal birth canal flora, which is bacteria, which is extremely good for the immunity of your child from birth all the way through their life. And this can't be replicated if the baby isn't birthed through the vaginal canal. You can't like create that like coating of immunity. It's just not something that can be done. So for that reason and that reason alone, it's imperative to do that. Yes. So what's your thoughts on C-section birth? Coming from a pre-med student. This was from Ken. Great question. So I talked on it a little bit, Ken. I think you must have missed this. Listen, I am not a doctor, nor do I play one on television. I simply happen to know a lot about the physical and sexual anatomy of men and women because of what I do, and because I've had a natural birth as a tantric practitioner and master and holistic nutritionist. So I understand the implications of what these procedures are used for, life or death scenarios. Absolutely. Cesareans are a must if it's life or death. Absolutely. Now, if it's just to pad the doctor's wallets, then no. The recovery time for women is insane. And I know friends that have had cesarean, they never get like that strength back, that like core strength back. They have typically an unsightly scar. The recovery time, like it's hard for them to nurse their child, to like hold, because when you think of doing anything, it's involving this core area, this pelvic girdle. So if they have children at home and then they want to nurse the baby, they can't do it, they can't get up. There's obviously some more dangers that I don't even want to get to that are involved in a cesarean. Like, just think about it, you're being cut open. And at the end of the day, is the cesarean really necessary? Is this a life or death situation? Absolutely, it's necessary. But if it's not, is it more for convenience because the woman doesn't necessarily want to go through the pain and the unfortunate challenges that come along, uncomfortabilities that come along with birthing vaginally and things like that? And is it just she wants to get in and get it done, and she schedules it like a hair appointment or a blowout? Like these types of reasonings, I personally just don't have, I don't want to say that because that sounds bad. I don't want to say I don't have respect for them, but I think that there's a better way, and if only they tried. Now, if there was an intervention and something had to be done, like the woman's body wasn't capable, or the doctor said it was life or death, then absolutely, cesarean's necessary. But is it really, really necessary? That's my thing. Or are we just doing this out of convenience for the women because they don't want to go through the pain, they don't want to mess up the body? Yes, you have a scar, but you know, it's quicker, quote, if you will, and it's making a lot of doctors, hospitals, a lot of money. Vaginal births are not money makers, right? Natural births, we're laboring for a long time, just not money makers. So I think for those reasons, you have to reconsider, obviously take every birth as a case by case basis. But I think that these are really important topics. You have to understand, as men, we don't think about these scenarios because we think, oh, I'm never giving birth, I'm not a woman. But the chances are you probably will have a partner. You probably will get married. You probably might have a child. So understanding these things can be a huge benefit for a woman. And the more of a wife material that your woman is, the more these issues are going to be important to her, and it's going to be very helpful and useful for her to know that you are somewhat educated and have an idea of the process, what's going on. And also just to pay homage and respect to your mom coming up this Mother's Day, like what she went through, what she, you know, everything that she experienced to bring you, your siblings and things like that into the world. And if you have children, your children's mother, even if you're not with them, like that's still a huge thing, a huge feat. And I think that it's something that we should celebrate mothers for, because men simply aren't doing this work. And that's the way it should be. So that will be it for today. I want to share with you a little sneak peek of what is to come for me. You stay to the end of the video. So I do have a book that's coming out. It's called Unf Your Sex Life, Unleashing Passion and Intimacy for an Orgasmic Relationship. And my surprise is that a very good friend of mine, Terrell Owens, actually wrote the foreword for this book. So it's definitely a must read. We're already doing pre-sales to get your copies ordered. And there will be a card, I believe, on the videos so that you can get your copy reserved. I will be doing some kind of signing, I believe, in Los Angeles. And yeah, I think it will be fun to hopefully meet some of you. So thank you so much, guys, for watching. For those of you tuning in on Apple and Spotify, this was episode 3, myths of motherhood, birthing rather, that they didn't tell you about. I hope this shed some light onto some of the myths of birthing that you weren't informed are, what the truth is. And the next episode, we'll have 2 more episodes on motherhood, and then we will switch to the misunderstandings of semen retention, edging, no fapping, tantric semen retention, brahmacharya, and the likes. So stay tuned. Please turn on your notifications, like this, leave me a comment. I'm working hard to get back into the algorithms, posting content for you guys twice a week. Thank you guys on Spotify and Apple for listening. Share this, like this. It doesn't cost you a thing, it's free. And if you want to go more in depth and get the content that I can't post on here, then check out my Patreon. I have full hours, 1, 2, 3 hours sessions of me in actual retreats with real couples, real singles, with intimacy challenges, interventions, all live, all unfiltered, just for you. And I'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks so much, y'all. Have an amazing, outstanding rest of your day.